Well, absolutely. I think over the past years, China's economic development model has been in great question, being kind of questioned by many experts. For example, whether it's going to be this is a long sustainable kind of a development, or it's going to be kind of an economic boom at the cost of the environment and also at the cost of the kind of issue that we have been touching upon, like equalities and social and political equities. And so in this sense, I think that it is high time for Chinese government, and particularly the Hu and Wen administration, to consider and to address these issues so that, for example, inflation that affects a vast majority of this nation's general public. For example, as we all know that almost 50% of the incomes right now being earned by the general public now being spent on food. And with food prices rising, and if we know that inflation rate had been hovering around 5%, and that very 5% is almost like a threshold in terms of the kind of a perception or risk in this country. Okay. And so I would say that this is a cheap problem. This is going to be the priority on the government's agenda.
Okay, and yesterday we saw China raise its annual defense spending by nearly 13% to a whopping $92 billion. How is that playing into the economic forecasting?
Well, that, in fact, once again, is going to be a contributor to the economic development. But once again, that is almost a sideline issue. I think China's economy boom basically because of the kind of export and also the infrastructure-oriented economy. But with the military expenditure raised, I'm sure that once again it will contribute to the kind of a certain domestic consumption, because most of these factories that used to produce clothing and other equipment are for export, and now we'll turn to satisfy the demands of the domestic, including the military. And in this sense, I would say this is also going to be contributing to the domestic consumption at this very point.
All right, Teng Shimeng, thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, Nepal's former Prime Minister, Krishna Prasad Bhattacharya, has died. He was 87. Bhattacharya served as Prime Minister of the Himalayan nation twice after leading a popular movement to restore multi-party democracy in 1990 and again 9 years later. The government has announced a national period of mourning. Bhattacharya will be cremated on Sunday. Now, what's pink, green and silver and travels at 300 kilometers an hour? Japan's latest bullet train has made its debut. With its trademark snout, the Hayabusa, or Falcon, pulled out of Tokyo Station. Unusually late, a passenger trying to take photos fell off the platform. It'll cost $320 for a one-way trip from the capital to the northern city of Aomori, which until now has been off the Shinkansen network map. It'll go even faster from next year, 320 kilometers an hour, not quite as speedy as China's Harmony Express at 350 kilometers an hour. Stay with Al Jazeera. Later in the news hour, we speak to the so-called hacktivists who are bringing down the websites of major corporations and governments. And an attack off the field will tell you about Real Madrid coach Jose Mourinho's lucky escape. More on that. Stay with us.
Afghanistan is faced with a huge challenge.
Relations have gone really sour between us and our allies.
We have inflicted considerable damage on the enemy.
The people who make international headlines.
Ultimately, the truth will out.
They want to stop this publication of information that embarrasses them.
Make time for Sir David Frost. Frost over the world. At this time on Al Jazeera.
What Gaddafi has done, he dismantled or destroyed the system in the country.
As chaos and violence sweep across Libya.
They're living through fear, they're living through a nightmare.
They're using ammunition, live ammunition.
Al Jazeera hears from those who have lived in fear of Gaddafi's regime.
We don't want him to leave. We want to arrest him. 42 years is too much.
Libya, a state of terror. At this time on Al Jazeera.
People talk about televising the revolution. It's tweeting the revolution, Facebooking the revolution, videotaping the revolution.
A new world driven by new media.
This is a very peculiar moment in media history.
Nobody can force me in 2011 to watch whatever I don't want to watch.
Analyzing the media's role in shaping modern history. The Listening Post, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera. Now, the latest US unemployment figures suggest the world's biggest economy is recovering from its deep recession. Almost 200,000 people found work last month, and for the third month in a row, the jobless rate edged down to below 9%. But the main Dow Jones index on Wall Street wasn't impressed. It was down 88 points because turbulence in the Middle East threatens to send oil prices higher. Staying in the US and to a group called Anonymous. It includes cyber activists who describe themselves as aggressive proponents of free speech. They've targeted everything from the Church of Scientology to the big businesses that withdrew donations from WikiLeaks. And now they've turned their attention to the uprisings in the Middle East. Al Jazeera's Scott Hyder spoke to some of the group's members.
Hello world, we are Anonymous.
As a movement, they say they don't have a political stance and they don't even have a members list. But they do have the power to assist revolutionaries and bring down the websites of multi-billion-dollar corporations. They call themselves Anonymous, a group of nameless internet activists or hacktivists. A few from their operations arm spoke with us via video chat.
Anonymous or Anon has been described in many ways, a collective, a movement. What are you guys and what do you stand for?
There are a lot of ideas in Anon. The best way to describe it is the freedom of speech, freedom of information, and the freedom of expression taken to a logical extreme.
You've also been called thugs. Do you break the law?
Some of the things we do are illegal, but sometimes we need to do illegal things to make change. I wouldn't call us thugs. We're certainly not thugs. We're not anything like that. Criminals, I guess. We are breaking laws, but for the greater good.
So where do these hacktivists come from, and who are they?
I think for the younger generation, in Anonymous and outside of Anonymous, it's kind of the face of protesting for the digital age. It's people who are getting their sense of humor, getting their culture from online, and going out there and taking it to the streets.
Anon hacked the corporate websites of Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal in response to their move to stop processing donations for anti-secrecy organization WikiLeaks.
A lot of what we've done as far as hacking and the release of material, we specifically aim to avoid hurting people. I mean, you look at the Visa, MasterCard attacks. We brought down their websites, as opposed to, hitting the infrastructure that would have prevented their services from working. We could have done that, but we didn't.
Of late, Anonymous has aligned themselves with the uprisings in the Arab world, taking down government websites in Tunisia and Egypt. They jam the sites by flooding them with requests. Most of Anon's activities appear political in nature, but their most recent attack was personal. The target, Aaron Barr, chief executive of the HB Gary Security Company, who had taunted Anonymous, saying he could identify most of the group's leaders. Anonymous retaliated immediately, hacking into HB Gary's server and publishing more than 70,000 internal company emails. As a final flourish, it left a message on HB Gary's website saying, "You brought this on yourself. Let us teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Don't mess with Anonymous." It's a warning other companies will